talk to the founder. Founders founded a company for a reason. It's because they're obsessed with the problem that you solve, and they're usually obsessed with the space that you're in. So sit down with them and just say, what's on your mind right now? What are you thinking about? What's bothering you? Where do you see the industry going? They will talk your ear off. A 15-minute conversation, you're going to walk away with dozens of potential topics.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Talk with me, Varun Uday. A good content marketing engine is almost a must-have for every SaaS firm today, and oftentimes it also acts as the sole lead generation channel. To talk more about this in detail, I have with me today Sam Grover. Hey Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, great to be here.
It's great to have you here today. So can we start off with an introduction to you, a little bit about your background and what you're doing right now?
Sure. So I've been a copywriter and content strategist for more than 10 years now. I'm self-employed and have been on my own since late 2017, so that's nearly 3 years. Prior to that, I worked for a number of different places. I think the most relevant, I worked for accounting software company Xero, where I started off as a copywriter and then moved into a role where I worked on their more higher level messaging and positioning to really change the way that we talked about the benefits of our product. Since I went out on my own in late 2017, I've been working on copywriting and content strategy for a number of SaaS and fintech businesses mostly, and I work on a bunch of stuff, but the three main areas are landing pages, case studies, and email sequences. All things in that sort of middle of the funnel niche, where it's all about helping businesses turn more of their leads into paying customers, because that's an area where a lot of businesses tend to underinvest. So I've been doing that for a while, and it's been going great. And now here I am to talk about it on your podcast.
Great, and it's awesome that you could make it here today. So how does content contribute to the marketing pipeline, Sam?
So there's two main threads to this, and one's at the top of the funnel and one's in the middle of the funnel. That's where content can do the most work for your business. At the top of the funnel, content can help to raise awareness and to educate people around the problem that you solve, and it can also help to build trust in what you do. So, for example, things like educating people. If you have a large audience who isn't aware of the problem that you solve, you can create content that helps make them aware of that problem, and then that turns them from just people who are out there into people who are looking for a solution to the problem that you've made them aware of. This happens a lot in the fintech space, where a lot of fintech is about apps like Robinhood in the States and so on. They're about selling investment products and financial services to people who don't historically consume those services. So by helping people to understand more about in this case investing as a whole, you're essentially creating a market for your product. The next area where content can help with the pipeline is in the middle of the funnel, where you can essentially use, again, it's about education, about turning your leads into more qualified leads and people who are more likely to convert into a paying customer. So the problem with that solving is that you can put out ads and do all kinds of top of the funnel stuff to get people into your system, but and those people are going to divide into people who are immediately keen for whatever you have to sell, and they're just going to essentially convert anyway. but that's a very small number. And then there's a very small number of people who are never going to buy whatever you have to sell. And then there's a large number of people in between that who either who have a demand for what you have to sell, but aren't ready to buy right now for whatever reason. Or they might have demand for what you have to sell, but they need to learn more about what it is. So for these people, content can help to educate them and push them along. A group who does this really well are actually real estate agents and mortgage brokers, because most people, most of the time, don't want to buy a house. But if you're in, say, a real estate agent's pipeline, they can just sort of keep you aware of the fact that they exist and educate you around things by sending you stuff like, you get those monthly emails from real estate agents telling you, how much houses have been going for in your area and things like that. And that means when you are ready to sell or buy a house, they're top of mind, and you also know that they know what they're talking about. So it's about just keeping in touch and moving people along until they're ready to move into the next phase where they're ready to buy.
Right. So once you've got them interested, how do you nurture these leads with content through different stages of the funnel? Or how do you tailor content for each stage of the funnel?
Well, it's about a really good framework that I use it's from a book called Breakthrough Advertising from the 1960s, it's called Stages of Awareness. And there's basically 5 stages, and I won't go through all 5 of them because I never remember all 5 of them. But the most aware people are people who are ready to buy right now, and all they need is an offer. And the least aware people are the people who don't know anything about your product, and they also don't know that the problem that you solve even exists. So what you want to do when you're creating content is really think about, and you may have to do research for this, and find out what stage of awareness the audience you're speaking to is in, and how you can move them to the next stage. So if you have people who are really, if they're aware of the problem you solve and they're aware of the different solutions out there, then the content that you want to tailor to them is going to be content that talks about why your solution is the best one compared to the other ones. If you have people who are not yet aware of the problem you solve, then you want to tailor your content to make them aware of that problem. So, as a silly example, if you were a gardener, you could have there might be people who don't realize that it's possible to maintain a garden and make it not look like a jungle. Obviously those people don't really exist, but if they did, that's who you would tailor that's who you might tailor your content to educate those people that their garden can look better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So how important is making a content calendar, and how would you go about it?
With the content calendar, I mean, there's a lot of different schools of thought on this. And so one way is to be very granular and really specifically plan out, on Monday we're going to do this thing, on Tuesday we're going to do this thing, and plan that out for as long as you want. I find that often doesn't really work. I think organizations often like to do that because it gives them a feeling of a security blanket of saying, oh, we've got our content planned out in granular detail for the next 6 months. But I find that it tends to fall apart after not very long. Either other things come up, or things take longer than you expected, or things like that. And very quickly that calendar isn't working. The other way that doesn't really work is people don't plan at all, and they just be reactive. They just sort of generate content on an ad hoc basis, and you're constantly running on the seat of your pants. And this doesn't really work either because it's not very strategic. You're constantly reacting to things that you think of, but you're but you're not really thinking about, what do we want to achieve? So put those to one side. What I think is a better approach is to actually start from the objective of what you want to do with your content. So if we think about what we were talking about before, with tailoring content to the stage of awareness and where people are in the funnel. So if you say you have a whole bunch of leads that aren't, they've been in your system for ages, they're not taking any action, they're not converting. You might want to get in touch with some of them and figure out what their barriers are to converting. It might be education, it might be they don't see value, it might be that they just forgot about you. There's all kinds of things. And if you can identify that, then you start. Now you've identified a problem, and then you can start to tailor your content to solve that problem, and then build up from there to create your content plan and strategy. So to actually plan it out and chart it out, there's two ways that I recommend. Once you've figured out that problem that you want to solve, one way is to use what I call pillar content, and that's when you on a regular basis, say once a month, once a quarter, whatever works for your business, develop something really meaty with lots of information. It might be research based, it might be might be just based on insights from your business, something like a white paper or a guide or a series of case studies, a report, something that, but the key is it's got to have really good information that's relevant to your audience. And then what you do is you pull information out of that, and you repurpose it into the specific things that you've identified as your vehicles for solving the problem that you identified before. So you might have identified that your leads need more information showing the value of your product. So you could put together a report showing lots of different ways that your product added value to different customers in different industries, using your really quantitative data, all that, really good testimonials and proof points. From there, you could then take those testimonials and proof points and information from that and easily turn that into a series of emails and send those to your leads. You could also turn that into blog posts. You could turn it into social media posts and ads. But what you're doing is you're taking that key pillar content and you're just remixing it over and over again for all the different ways you can communicate with your audience. So that's a really, that's a really solid way to do it, because rather than having a calendar of a whole bunch of different things, you're actually just doing one thing and putting a lot of effort into it, and then you're just using the fixed cost of that effort over and over again and amortizing it over lots of different smaller things, and it can be really efficient. And also it keeps your messaging on your content a lot more consistent because it is essentially the same thing over and over again. So the other way you can do this is so that's really good for things like campaigns and lead nurturing, stuff like that. For things like a blog, and I know we'll get to this in a minute, but one way for things like blogs or even like newsletters and stuff like that, things that are more more about creating new content on a regular basis. A really good way to address that is to come up with 3 to 5 what I call topic buckets, categories of posts or newsletters or whatever that you're going to focus on. And then you can put together a short-term plan for, like, say, if you can do a blog a week, you can come with a month of blogs, which is 4 blogs. Like just thinking of one thing within each of those buckets. And this is a useful way to do it because it just takes you a level beyond that sort of blank page. When you just have a blank page, it's really, it can be really intimidating. But if you have a little bit of structure around what you talk about, that can really get your mind moving and get you thinking of topics to chart out. So those are the two ways that I recommend for planning and charting out content calendars. One, create pillar content and repurpose it. Two, think of a few topics that you want to consistently cover and plan on a short to midterm basis of a month to 6 weeks at a time.
Got it. So now you've planned out for your content and you've also produced it, all right? But without distributing it, it's as good as nothing, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So how do you go about distributing your content?
So again, I think this is something that you want to start from the other way around. I think because if you produce your content and then think, oh, how are we going to distribute this? You might find that you've produced something and then the channel that you have available isn't suitable for whatever you've produced. So you're now going to have to either decide not to do that, or you're going to have to cram it into that channel in a way that may not really work. So again, I think this is about going back to what is the problem we're trying to solve here? What is the information that our customer needs to get them to persuade them to do what we want them to do? And also where is our customer to receive this information? And then you can sort of work backwards. That's where that pillar idea I was talking about before is really effective. Say, this is I spend a lot of time in email marketing, so this is the examples I always use. But say you find that your customers in the middle of your funnel need certain information, and that they consistently open emails from you. Well, so now that's told you that that email is a good distribution channel for you. So now you want to work backwards to create content for that distribution channel. And now you can make sure that the content fits that channel in a effective way. So really my advice there is really just don't start from the content and then find the channel. Rather find the channel and then build the content to meet that channel.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it. So once you've done all of this, right, how do you measure the ROI of content marketing?
Again, this splits into, for middle of the funnel stuff, it's very straightforward to measure your ROI, especially, the further down the funnel you get, the easier it gets. If you're sending out an offer to a whole bunch of people who are just, who are right at the bottom of your funnel and are ready to convert, well then that's very straightforward. How many people took you up on the offer? Easy. However, the further up the funnel you get, the harder it gets to measure your ROI. And I think there's a certain amount of, especially as you get to the top, there's a certain amount of accepting that you can't really track the ROI. For example, if you're, the best example is the really top of the funnel awareness stuff. If you're doing blogs and you're posting them and you're putting money behind them and you're getting them out there, it is difficult to measure how many of those views are turning into sales. But that does, and I think before you start, you need to accept that just because something's difficult to measure doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing it. Rather, you should be sort of accepting what you can measure and then measuring that, and then accepting what you can't measure and then not really worrying about that. That's not to say you should just be doing things just for the sake of doing them. You do want to have a clear strategy, and you do want to be measuring something. For example, if you're putting blogs on social media, and you're keeping track of how many views and how much engagement it gets, that's definitely worth doing. But it's good to keep those numbers high. And if those numbers start to drop, then you should look at what's going on. However, you're going to struggle to connect those views and engagement numbers with a clear sales outcome. And I think you just need to sort of accept that. Because, I see organizations run into problems sometimes of, they look at everything they're doing and they say, oh, look, all our bottom of the funnel stuff, when we send out offers, it does great because that's so easy to measure, But when we post blogs, all we get are views and comments, and we don't know, that we don't know what that's doing. So we're going to stop doing it. So they turn that top of the funnel stuff off, and then suddenly, the uptake of their offers for the bottom of the funnel stuff starts to fall away. And there's no, you can't find the direct causal link, but it is there. It's just you can't see it until you turn off that top of the funnel stuff. So I think you just need to kind of accept that a certain amount of stuff you put out there is going to be very hard to measure in a sales context. However, as I said, that doesn't mean you should just be reflexively putting out content and saying, "Oh, this is just what we do." You should be keeping an eye on how many people look at things, how many people comment on things, how many people engage in things. But I think just with the understanding that you'll never be able to say, "Oh, for every 100 views of our blog, that turns into one sale." You're never going to be able to say that because there's so much noise between the top and the bottom of the funnel. But what you should do is find something about your content that you can measure, and keep track of that so you can measure, because it is worth knowing. If you do 10 blogs and 9 of them get 1,000 views each, and the 10th one gets 100, that's worth knowing. And that's worth examining. Why is that happening? Why did this 10th blog get 10% of the views of the previous 9? Because that's going to tell you how well your content is engaging with people, but it's not going to connect to a sales figure, unfortunately.
Yeah, got it. So one problem that content marketers usually face is keeping the content engine going, especially when there aren't new products or feature releases happening. So yeah, how do you keep that content engine running?
Sure. This is one of the most common problems that organizations run into. They know they should be producing content. They know they need to. They know that people react well to it, but they have trouble coming up with stuff. It's one of the most common problems I run into. So for anyone listening who's struggling with this, just know that you're not alone. So there's 3 really good ways to do this that I've found. One is to answer questions in public. And so what you're going to want to do here is talk to 2 groups of people internally. Talk to your sales team and talk to your customer service team. And what you want to find out is what are the questions coming through? What are these teams talking about with customers day in and day out? And then answer that. And if those questions are coming through, then you know that there's demand for answers to them. So just answer them. And if they're product questions, you want to turn them into the wider question. So for example, because just answering product questions is fine, but it's not going to connect with anybody who isn't already in your product and using it. So rather you want to listen to product questions and figure out what the job someone is trying to do when they ask that product question. So, for example, say you're doing a blog for Google Sheets. If you're getting lots of questions about how to make a graph, you wouldn't want to make a blog that's just how to make a graph if you're looking for top of the funnel audiences. Rather, you'd want to make a blog that is, the value of graphs, how to make a graph that connects with people, how to articulate yourself through graphs. So not so much just how to make a graph in our product. It would be how to make a graph in general, how to make your graph stand out. Essentially what you're trying to do here is identify what these people are trying to achieve, in their life, in their business, and then answer that. So it's just like a level above what the product question is. At Xero, we did this a lot with, people asked questions about reconciling their bank account or, things like that. So we turn that into content around cash flow, because that's really, when you're reconciling your bank statements against your invoices and payments, you're not just doing a task, you're actually trying to keep an eye on your business's cash flow. And so that was the kind of content we created, that one level up from whatever the product question was. So that's the first way. Answer questions in public. Talk to your customer service, talk to your sales, find out the questions, interrogate what the wider problem is, and answer that wider problem. The next way is to more broadly educate people about the general space that you're in. I mentioned earlier about, this is a really common one in fintech, but really anywhere where you're dealing with customers who are new to whatever it is you provide. So for these people, you want to figure out where are the gaps in their knowledge. What do current customers know now that they wish they'd known when they first became customers? So the way to find that out is to talk to your customers themselves. Get them on the phone, find out what their journey was, get them to talk you through it, and then what you can also do is send out surveys to your customers. Again, find out what did they wish they knew when they first signed up, and what do they know now, and then you can use content to bridge that gap. And even just one conversation, you're probably going to get a lot of different topics, and then from there you can that's going to give you ideas for more topics. So just a few is going to branch out into even more. So that's the other way. Talk to your customers, find out what their problems were, solve those problems in public. The last one is, this is particularly true for SaaS businesses and startups in general, is talk to the founder. Founders founded a company for a reason. It's because they're obsessed with the problem that you solve, and they're usually obsessed with the space that you're in. So sit down with them and just say, what's on your mind right now? What are you thinking about? What's bothering you? Where do you see the industry going? And they founded these businesses because they're passionate people. They will talk your ear off. A 15-minute conversation, you're going to walk away with, it's not going to be a conversation, it's going to be them talking at you. And you're going to walk away with dozens of potential topics that you can think through and flesh out. So I really encourage anyone who's in a really founder-dominated business, try to schedule in a conversation with that founder at least once a month should be fine. It doesn't need to be anything huge. These are busy people, but if you can squeeze 15 minutes out of them once a month, that's going to fill your content pipeline really easily. I guess my last point is that with these three, I would really recommend that businesses use all three of these approaches, because all three are going to generate different types of content. They're solving problems to educate people about your overall space you're in. They're solving product problems and the associated issues with that. And then there's the wider things that founders are going to be thinking about. Where's the industry headed? Stuff like that. So a mix of all three of these things is going to give you a really solid mix of content that you can work with. And then again, you can remix it, you can repurpose it, and just try to get as much out of each topic as you possibly can.
Okay, awesome. We've had a great chat, Sam. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for those insights, and thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Yeah, it's great to talk. Yeah, really good to be here.
Thank you, and I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.
Thanks. You too. All right. See ya.
year.